On a recent visit to a local museum, I spotted this suitcase sitting on a baggage cart on the railway station platform. It seemed a perfect subject to model, beat up as it was. It obviously has seen extensive travel, the leather on the edges being well worn. In places, it's even starting to come apart. I was able to photograph all four sides, and top and bottom, so I thought I would use the photos for the texture. The first model I made ended up with 735,098 polys. A lot for such a small object. But it was partly by design. I wanted to use the model to demonstrate a technique known as normal stamping. By creating normal map stamps for the detail, I was able to reduce the poly count to less than 500, a much more respectable count for an asset made for Trainz. It also meant that I didn't need to generate levels of detail copies. Normal map stamps are an easy way to add detail to your model without adding geometry, that is, more faces. They are the same as the normal maps you see as part of the PBR material texture sets. The idea is that you create a base mesh as your model. Then you create the detail as separate meshes. The suitcase has several details that lend themselves to normal stamping. The locks, the hinges on the bottom, and the metal feet on the bottom. The handle could also be added using normal stamping, but I elected to add it as a mesh, since I was able to do so and still keep the poly count under 500. Since the detail is going to be baked onto the base mesh, you can use as much geometry as you like. In fact, the more geometry, the better. The detail, once painted on, will be more enhanced. When baking a normal map, only changes in direction, not depth, are baked. Thus, faces which are completely parallel will not appear. To make sure your geometry detail gets baked, you need to taper the edges, that is, use slopes, or use bevels, or even better, use both. Once you have completed your detailed mesh, you convert it to a normal map. The most convenient method is to create a Blender template. You can store this Blender file and use it over and over again. The detailed map is appended to the Blender file and positioned under a camera. A viewport render image is created and saved. The normal stamp is then used to paint the detail onto the base mesh using PBR Painter. Here we have the lock normal stamps painted onto the base mesh, the suitcase, and a material applied to the normal stamps and the suitcase. For the base mesh, we are going to adjust the dimensions of the cube primitive and then use the bevel modifier to bevel all the edges. Open Blender in the Layout workspace. In the Properties window, select the Scene tab, then the Units chevron, and change the units to Imperial. In the 3D Editor window, open the Properties panel, keyboard shortcut the N key, and change the dimensions to x equals 30 IN, y equals 10 IN, and z equals 17 IN. Using IN enters the dimensions in inches. Change the Z location to 8.5 IN so that the cube sits on the ground plane. With the cube selected, apply the transformations. Keyboard shortcut Control plus the A key, then select Rotation and Scale. Zoom in on the mesh. Keyboard shortcut the number pad period key. In the outline window, rename the cube mesh to Suitcase. With the suitcase still selected, apply a bevel modifier. In the Properties window, select the Modifier tab, then Add Modifier, and select Bevel. Increase the segments to 2 and reduce the amount to 0.02. Apply the modifier. Shade Smooth. Keyboard shortcut, select the Object menu, then select Shade Smooth. Save your work. Save the Blender file as suitcase01.blend. To position the lock, we are going to use a top view image of the suitcase as a background image. A copy of the image can be found here. Switch to top view, keyboard shortcut number pad 7 key. Toggle on wireframe and X-ray modes. You can select the icons in the menu bar or use the keyboard shortcut Shift plus the Z key. Add the top view image. Select the Add menu, then Image, then Background, then locate and load the image. Scale the image to fit the outline of the suitcase mesh. Zoom in on the left-hand lock. From the tool shelf, select the Cursor tool and place the cursor in the center of the lock. In the tool shelf, switch back to the Selection tool. Add a plane primitive. Keyboard shortcut Shift plus the A key, then select Mesh, then select Plane. Scale and position to fit the rectangle of the lock. Switch to front view, keyboard shortcut the number pad 1 key, and zoom in on the plane, keyboard shortcut number pad period key. Switch to edit mode and face selection mode. Extrude on the Z-axis 0.02, keyboard shortcut the E key and enter 0.02. Switch to edge selection mode. Select the top loop of edges and scale to taper the sides. With the edges still selected, bevel the edges. Keyboard shortcut Ctrl plus the B key and drag. In the option window, set the width to 0.05 and the segments to 4. This would be a good time to save your work. Save your Blender file as suitcase02.blend. Switch to top view. In the tool shelf, select the cursor tool and set the cursor to the center of the keyhole. In the tool shelf, switch back to the selection tool. Add a circle primitive. Scale to the keyhole and fill the face. Extrude on the Z-axis 0.02. Keyboard shortcut the E key and enter 0.02. With the edges still selected, bevel. In the option window, set the width to 0.05 and the segments to 4. In top view, select the inner loop of edges. Keyboard shortcut Shift plus Alt plus left mouse button and scale to fit the keyhole opening. Switch to vertex selection mode. Toggle on snapping and set the target to vertex. Snap the vertices as shown and delete the single vertex. Select all the vertices and remove doubles. Select the Mesh menu, then select Cleanup and select Merge by Distance. Switch to edge selection mode. Select the two edges as shown and subdivide. Keyboard shortcut, select the Edge menu, then subdivide. Switch to vertex selection mode. Join the two new vertices. Keyboard shortcut the F key. Drag the new edge down to shape the keyhole. Keyboard shortcut the G key followed by the G key and drag. Subdivide the selected edge. Switch to solid mode and fill in the faces at the bottom of the keyhole. Select the edges of the keyhole outline and extrude down by snapping to one of the bottom vertices of the lock plate. Toggle off snapping. Taper in the bottom of the keyhole. Keyboard shortcut the S key and drag. Select the two vertices as shown and taper. Select the top loop of edges and bevel, setting the width to 0.05 and the segments to 4. This would be a good time to save your work. Save your Blender file as suitcase03.blend. Before we model the latch, let's clean things up a bit. I meant to construct the keyhole as a separate mesh, so let's separate it now. Switch to wireframe mode and X-ray mode. Keyboard shortcut Shift plus the Z key. In front view, box select the keyhole and separate. Keyboard shortcut the P key, then select Separate. Name the new mesh Keyhole and name the plane mesh Plate. You can also name the empty image Top. Switch to top view and zoom out. In the tool shelf, select the cursor tool and place the cursor at the center of the latch curve as shown. In the tool shelf, switch back to selection tool. Add a circle primitive and scale down to fit the curve of the latch. In edit mode, fill the circle mesh. Separate the circle mesh and name it Latch. Make a copy of the latch mesh and position it to the curve on one side as shown. Make a copy of the Latch 001 mesh and move it on the x-axis to the curve on the other side. Select and join Latch 001 and Latch 002 and name the mesh Cutter. We are going to use the Knife Project tool to shape the latch. The Knife Project tool uses one mesh, known as the cutter, to cut out a shape in another mesh, known as the target. In our case, the target is the latch mesh. The cutter is placed slightly above the target, and the cutting is done viewing the meshes face on. In object mode, one selects the target mesh, then switches to edit mode and selects the cutter mesh. From the mesh menu, one then selects the Knife Project tool. One then hides the cutter mesh and deletes the cutout faces. Here goes. In object mode, with the cutter mesh selected, switch to solid mode and raise the cutter mesh on the Z-axis to slightly above the latch mesh. Hide all of the meshes except the latch and the cutter. In object mode, select the latch mesh. Switch to edit mode and select the cutter mesh. Then select the mesh menu and then Knife Project. Hide the cutter mesh and delete the cutout portions of the latch mesh. Switch to vertex selection mode and delete the bottom vertices and the bottom 3 pairs of vertices on the sides. Select the 2 bottom vertices and join. Keyboard shortcut the F key. Unhide the top image if it is hidden. Drag downwards and then scale in the vertices to conform to the latch image. Select all of the vertices, keyboard shortcut the A key, and fill the mesh, keyboard shortcut the F key. In object mode, select the cutter mesh. Set the origin to the geometry. Keyboard shortcut the Object menu, then Set Origin, then Origin to Geometry. Position and scale the cutter mesh to the curves on the side of the latch mesh, as shown. Switch to solid mode. In object mode, select the latch mesh. Switch to edit mode and select the cutter mesh. Then select the mesh menu and then Knife Project. Hide the cutter mesh and delete the cutout portion of the latch mesh. Switch to vertex selection mode and dissolve the bottom 3 pairs of vertices. Keyboard shortcut the X key, then select Dissolve Vertices. Select all the vertices, keyboard shortcut the A key, and extrude upwards 0.02 feet. Scale to taper the sides. Keyboard shortcut the S key and drag. With the edges still selected, bevel. Keyboard shortcut Ctrl plus the B key and drag. In the Options window, set the width to 0.05 and the segments to 4. Unhide the plate mesh. Toggle on snapping with the target set to vertex. Select the latch mesh, keyboard shortcut the A key, and snap to the bottom corner vertex of the plate mesh. Keyboard shortcut, select the G key, then the Z key, and position the mouse cursor over the bottom corner vertex of the plate mesh. Left mouse button to confirm the action. We now want to split the latch mesh into 2 parts, so we can raise one part up on top of the plate mesh. To do this, we will duplicate the latch mesh, then use the Boolean modifier on each mesh. We first want to make sure that the latch mesh does not protrude above or below the plate mesh. In Object Mode, select the latch mesh and set the origin to the geometry. Keyboard shortcut the Object menu, then Set Origin, then Origin to Geometry. Scale slightly on the Z-axis until the latch mesh just disappears within the plate mesh. Keyboard shortcut the S key, then the Z key, and drag, then enter. Duplicate the latch mesh. Keyboard shortcut Shift plus the D key, then enter. With the Latch 001 mesh selected, apply a Boolean modifier. Under Object, select Plate, and select Difference. Select the chevron and select Apply. Select the latch mesh and apply a Boolean modifier. Under Object, select Plate and select Intersect. Select the chevron and select Apply. With the latch mesh still selected, move it up on the Z-axis. Toggle on snapping and set the target to Face Project. Move the latch mesh down on the Z-axis, snapping to the top face of the plate mesh. Keyboard shortcut, select the G key, then the Z key, and position the mouse cursor over the top face of the plate mesh and select Enter. This would be a good time to save your work. Save your Blender file as suitcase04.blend. Switch to Edit Mode and Edge Selection Mode, and select the edge as shown. Set the cursor to the selection. Keyboard shortcut Shift plus the S key, then select Cursor to Selected. Switch to Object Mode and add a cylinder primitive. Set the rotation Y to 90 degrees, the width to 0.02 feet, and the depth to 0.13 feet. Select the end loops of edges on the cylinder and bevel. In the Options window, set the width to 0.02 and the segments to 4. Let's now add the rivets. Switch to Top View. In the tool shelf, select the Cursor tool and place the cursor in the upper right-hand corner of the latch. In the tool shelf, switch back to the Selection tool. Toggle on wireframe and X-ray modes. Keyboard shortcut Shift plus the Z key. Switch to Object mode and add a UV sphere primitive. Scale down to the size of the rivet. Position inside the bevel. In Front View, Edit Mode, and Vertex Selection Mode, delete the bottom half of the sphere mesh. Toggle off wireframe and X-ray modes. With snapping toggled on and face project selected as the target, snap the sphere mesh to the face of the latch. Toggle off snapping. Make copies of the sphere mesh by duplicating and position them for the other 4 rivets. Unhide the keyhole mesh. Select the sphere meshes, the plate, latch 001, and the keyhole meshes, and then select the latch mesh last. Join the meshes, keyboard shortcut Ctrl plus the J key. Shade Smooth, keyboard shortcut, select the Object menu, then select Shade Smooth. Then add an Edge Split modifier. Leave the angle at 30 degrees and apply. Rename the latch mesh to lock mesh. Unhide the suitcase mesh and select. Set the cursor to the world origin. Keyboard shortcut Shift plus the C key. Select the lock mesh and unhide the Properties panel. Keyboard shortcut the N key to see that the scales are not set to 1. Apply the transformations. Keyboard shortcut Ctrl plus the A key, then select Rotation and Scale. Set the origin of the lock mesh to the cursor. Keyboard shortcut, select the Object menu, then set Origin, then Origin to 3D Cursor. Add a Mirror modifier. And with the axis set to X, apply. This completes the lock mesh. This would be a good time to save your work. Save your Blender file as suitcase05.blend. To position the hinges, we are going to use a bottom view image of the suitcase as a background image. A copy of the image can be found here. Switch to bottom view. Keyboard shortcut number pad Control plus the 7 key. Toggle on wireframe and X-ray modes. Keyboard shortcut Shift plus the Z key. Add the bottom view image. Select the Add menu, then Image, then Background. Then locate and load the image. Scale the image to fit the outline of the suitcase mesh. Rotate the image 180 degrees on the Z-axis. Name the mesh Image Bottom. The hinges have a similar shape to the lock hatch, so we can duplicate the lock and use it as the starting point to model the hinges. In Object Mode, select the lock match and duplicate. Name the mesh Hinges. Switch to front view and set the origin to the geometry. Drag the hinges mesh down until it is below the suitcase mesh. Rotate on the x-axis 180 degrees. Switch to bottom view and rotate on the z-axis 180 degrees. Toggle off wireframe and X-ray modes. Toggle on snapping with the target set to face project. Snap the hinges mesh to the bottom face of the suitcase mesh. Toggle off snapping. Switch to bottom view, edit mode, and face selection mode. Hide all of the meshes except the hinges mesh, and delete all of the hinges mesh except the hinge plates and the cylinders. Use the L key to expand your selections. You will also need to switch to vertex selection mode to delete some of the mesh. In Object Mode, select and duplicate the Hinges mesh. Rotate the duplicate on the Z-axis 180 degrees. Delete the cylinders on the duplicate mesh. Switch to Side View, keyboard shortcut the number pad 3 key, and move the duplicate mesh into position on the Y-axis. In Object Mode, select the Hinges 001 mesh and the Hinges mesh and join. This completes the hinges. To form the feet, we will duplicate one of the rivets. Switch to Bottom View, Edit Mode, and Face Selection Mode, and center the Hinges mesh, keyboard shortcut number pad period key. Select a face of one of the rivets, and with the mouse cursor hovered over the rivet, expand the selection, keyboard shortcut the L key. Duplicate the selection, keyboard shortcut Shift plus the D key, then Enter. And separate, keyboard shortcut the P key. Name the new mesh Feet. In Object Mode, set the origin to the geometry. Keyboard shortcut the Object menu, then Set Origin, then Origin to Geometry. In the Outline window, hide the Suitcase mesh and Image Bottom. Toggle on Wireframe and X-ray modes. Position the mesh over a foot and scale up. Switch to Front View and scale the mesh to be slightly lower than the hinges. Toggle off Wireframe and X-ray modes. Toggle on Snapping and snap the mesh to the bottom of the suitcase mesh. Select the feet mesh. Apply transformations, keyboard shortcut Ctrl plus the A key, then select Rotation and Scale. Set the origin to the 3D cursor, keyboard shortcut the Object menu, then Set Origin, then Origin to 3D cursor. Add a mirror modifier and select both the X and Y axes. Apply the modifier. Toggle off snapping. Switch to Edit Mode. Select and duplicate one of the feet and place it in the center of the bottom. This would be a good time to save your work. Save your Blender file as suitcase06.blend. We are going to model a handle starting with the torus primitive. Switch to top view and hide all of the meshes except the suitcase mesh. Unhide the image top. Switch to object mode and toggle on wireframe and X-ray modes. Keyboard shortcut Shift plus the Z key. In the tool shelf, select the cursor tool. Place the 3D cursor in the center of the handle and add a torus primitive. Set the major segments to 12, the minor segments to 12, the major radius to 0.3 feet, and the minor radius to 0.05 feet. Rename the mesh handle. In the tool shelf, select the selection tool. Switch to edit mode and vertex selection mode. Delete the vertices on the top of the mesh. Select and scale the remaining vertices slightly on the x-axis and move up to fit the handle image. Select and delete the vertices on the right half. Select the vertices of the left end. Fill the face. Keyboard shortcut the F key. And inset. Keyboard shortcut the I key and drag. Switch to top view and drag the face to shape the end. Join the two middle vertices. Keyboard shortcut the J key. Switch to front view and delete the bottom vertices. Toggle off wireframe and X-ray modes. Place the 3D cursor at the world origin. Keyboard shortcut Shift plus the C key. Switch to object mode, and with the handle mesh selected, set the origin to the 3D cursor. Keyboard shortcut select Object menu, then Set Origin, then Origin to 3D Cursor. Add a mirror modifier. Select Clipping. Switch to top view and edit mode. Select the center vertices and drag until they meet. With clipping selected, the vertices will not go past the midpoint. Switch to object mode and apply the mirror modifier. Shade smooth. Now let's add the pad on either side of the handle. Switch to top view and toggle on wireframe and X-ray modes. In the tool shelf, select the 3D cursor tool. Place the 3D cursor in the center of the large end of the left pad. Once you have placed the cursor, you want to get out of cursor selection mode. In the tool shelf, select the Selection tool. Add a circle primitive and set the vertices to 12 and the radius to 0.08 feet. Switch to Edit mode. Duplicate the circle primitive. Move on the x-axis to the other end of the pad and scale to fit. In vertex selection mode, delete the vertices of the inner halves of both circles. Join the two circles and fill the face. Switch to front view and extrude on the z-axis 0.01 feet. Change the name of the mesh from Circle to Pad. Place the 3D cursor at the world origin. Switch to Object mode and with the pad's mesh selected, set the origin to the 3D cursor. Add and apply a mirror modifier. We are now ready to add the rings that attach the handle to the pads. Switch to Top View and place the 3D cursor at the end of the handle. Add a torus primitive. Set the major segments to 12, the minor segments to 8, the major radius to 0.06 feet, and the minor radius to 0.01 feet. Set the X rotation to 90 degrees and the Z rotation to minus 50 degrees. Switch to Edit mode, Front View, and toggle on Wireframe and X-ray modes. Delete the vertices inside the handle, pad, and suitcase meshes. Rename the mesh to Rings. Switch to Object mode. In the tool shelf, select the Selection tool. If need be, adjust the position on the ring so that it passes through the center of the large end of the pad mesh and the center of the end of the handle mesh. Unhide the Properties panel. With the ring mesh selected, apply the transformations. Keyboard shortcut Control plus the A key. Then select Rotation and Scale. Place the 3D cursor at the world origin. Set the pad mesh origin to the 3D cursor. Add and apply a mirror modifier. Shade smooth. Select the pad mesh, then the handle mesh, and join. We will leave the rings as a separate mesh, as it will be textured with a metallic material. Let's clean up the model. I forgot to apply the bevel modifier to the suitcase mesh, so let's apply it now. We could also add the cutter mesh, image top, and image bottom to a new collection. Unhide the cutter mesh and select it. With the mouse cursor hovered over the outline window, create a new collection. Keyboard shortcut the M key, then select New Collection, and name the new collection Aids. Drag the image top and image bottom into the new collection. This completes the modeling. Save your work. Save your Blender file as suitcase07.blend.